Okay. So I was doing. So I want to go into urology, right? Do you know what urology is? Not with.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I want to go into urology. That's the specialty I want to go into. That and sexual health. So I'm uh I'm doing. I have a patient, right? And I'm a preceptor because I'm still in school. So like I'm in the clinic and uh so I'm in the clinic and the ER and this guy comes in and he's like, hey, I he's like, hey, I want to I just need to get a checkup. Like I think I have a hernia, whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, sounds good. So I give the guy a checkup and his junk's good and I'm like, okay, well, like you might as well like do you need like last time you got a prostate check? Like you're over 50 years old and like you should be doing it every couple of years and it's not gonna hurt or anything. And he goes, oh yeah, I'd love one. And first of all, that should have been the fucking time. That should have been the first fucking time. Um,
Oh,
when he says, I would love to have a prostate check. Okay, so I'm going forward, and so there's a few things, right? But there's something called a Sims position, is what you see in all those where the guy like lays like bends over. I don't know if you've had a prostate check, but the guy you see it in the movies or in the comedy skits, like where the guy has his hand on the table and he bends over. Apparently, that's demeaning now, and even though it makes it much harder on the provider. So you have to lay them on their left side. So I lay them on his side, and I'm like, hey, I have my own technique. I just need you to bear down, relax for a second, and of course, like we bear down, or we have them bear down, and then I'm like, okay, well now you're gonna feel some pressure. Go ahead and bear down again. I got the timing down, and like I learned that from a person who's like really, really good, and like just head and shoulders above other people in the same field. So so I have it, I do it, and I'm sitting there, and the guy, okay, usually guys kind of like keep their like I don't know, like just accept the how everything feels and just like looks at a wall in front of them, doesn't turn around or anything, because you're left leaning on your left side.
yeah.
So I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden he literally turns, he like contorts his upper body, puts his left hand on the back of his head, and is staring directly at me. He goes, "Hey, anyone ever told you you have the softest hands?" And I literally, I'm finger deep in this guy's asshole, and I am now seizing because I'm looking at I'm looking at my professor, and I'm like, I'm trying so hard not to laugh, so hard not to laugh, because you're not allowed to. So I'm seizing in this guy's asshole, and and he can obviously tell that there's something like he can obviously tell that something ain't right, and and so I'm like sitting there and I'm like seizing, and you have to say stuff before you take your finger out because it's gonna give them the feeling that they have to shit. Like it's just a feeling. So I'm like seizing, and it's been like 30 seconds, and I'm trying so hard not to laugh, and my professor starts laughing, and now that's only making it harder on me because I want to laugh now. So I'm sitting there, and I'm like, okay, Garrett, you got this. Just all you have to do, just breathe, and then after you breathe, just say, hey, I'm gonna take my finger out, and that's it. That's all I gotta do. That's all I gotta do. So I finally do that, right? And my professor comes up to me after and goes, I have to be honest with you. I have never in the history of being a preceptor for students, ever had the same experience. No one has ever turned their body, looked at their provider straight in the eyes while their finger was still in their asshole, and said, your hands are so soft. And guess what the fuck? Literally, I left the room and I was like, oh my god, like, what was that?
I was about to say the first cue was, yeah, I'll take one of those.
Yeah. Nobody goes, hey, yeah, don't worry.
That sounds
yeah,
good.
Yeah, it sounds good, man. Like I really appreciate if you stuck your finger in my asshole. Like,
Oh boy.